for the Asia-Pacific region. Always nice to get to know the players a little bit better, as we don't get to see too much from them, the reactions on camera. So it's nice to know that they are, in fact, not just Hearthstone robots, although they that way, given how consistently some of them are playing. But it is going to be Flurry versus Alutemu up first, as we were saying. And Gia, nothing really too exciting in terms of the bans here, just the expected stuff, I would say.
Yeah, very standard. And even though it's not out of the box, I do feel like this is the strongest and most consistent strategy outside of maybe just not bringing Rogue. But we do see that this Demon Hunter list from both Alutemu and Flurry is one and the same. They have 30 cards straight down the middle, exactly the same, mirrored. And that just means I don't know who I'm going to put an advantage versus maybe just that one aspect of who gets to start on the play and who starts on the coin.
Yeah, could be a big difference maker. And taking a look at the list, which I think we're taking a look at Flurry's, doesn't actually matter, to be honest. As you said, they're both identical here. Oh, with the deck summaries overall. But yeah, the Tempo Demon Hunter, as you can see there, that is teched with a Frozen Shadow Weaver in there, as is Alutemu's, obviously. So should give them, at least some counterplay, even if they are identical in the mirror to their opponent's strategies. But then the very expected Galakron Secret Rogue from Flurry, and the Highlander Hunter, which we can both agree that we slightly prefer the face version, but overall, I am a fan of just any kind of Hunter as a fourth deck at the moment.
Yes, and I'm also a fan of the way that Flurry's been playing it. We saw on day one a very, very tense game between Flurry and Shansu's Face Hunter, and Flurry managed to find the line that actually won him the race by just playing down Dragonbane for offense and not defense. I really, really like that, and expect good things from him later too.
And then jumping over to Alutemu, we can see the same two decks in the Tempo Demon Hunter and the Galakron Rogue. The difference, of course, comes in the Spell Druid, which I've said time and time again, the Japanese players are so fond of. And while Possessi, Possessi has got it as well because he's omitted the Rogue. So again, all three of the players bringing it week after week with this kind of signature Ysera, that although they didn't initially seem to invent, we saw it from Rivius for the first time. They've just been going with it ever since.
Yep, and that could be their secret weapon, but at the same time, it could also be their downfall, because I think as far as Flurry's lists go, outside of his own Rogue, everything seems to have a pretty good matchup against Druid.
Yeah, it could be a bit of a tough one. I think Alutemu has been a player who's shown great knowledge with the Druid, however, in terms of sticking to his own game plan. He's not easily distracted by what the opponent is doing, and therefore overly reliant on removal in the early game. He realizes if you want to win these unfavorable matchups, you've got to get really fortunate with your draw, and therefore he's aggressively mulliganing for the good cards, which I'm a big fan of as that part of his strategy. But before we can get into that and see his Druid gameplay, we're of course going to have a look at the Demon Hunter mirror coming up first, which, like you said, Gia, the only real difference that we can see here is going to be the player going first versus going second. Is it the same as most aggro matchups where you would rather go first, or is there too much value that you can get out of the coin when there's a one-mana hero power involved?
It's really hard to say because Demon Hunter is different from many other aggro decks in the fact that it includes cards like Twin Slice, weapons, and just a lot of ways to remove the other side of the board without having to expend their own minions. And because of that, I feel like it's not as devastating for them to go second in an aggro mirror to something like Totem Shaman or Murloc Paladin. But at the same time, if you're able to go first and put down a Blazing Battle Mage or Battle Fiend, which isn't immediately answered, I can also see that snowballing.
Yeah, it's one of the things I love about Demon Hunter, especially when it first came out, was just the reactivity that comes down in these mirrors or against any aggro matchup. Because, for example, here, Alutemu's got what looks like a pretty good starting hand. He's got a one-drop Stater Overseer left unanswered and just run away with the game. But he's again just saying, I need to be more proactive in the early game. These cards are just too slow. It's 3 mana.
Proactive is the name of the game for this deck, but you can see here with the inclusion of Frozen Shadow Weaver, 2 ofs in both of these lists. They're including a little bit of reactivity without sacrificing aggressive potential. It's very strong in the mirror because you have that interaction of being able to freeze your opponent's face and not just their minions. And timed right, that can actually be crucial.
I'm seeing, personally, a pretty cool way here that a couple of big options here. The main thing that I want to set up, I think, is even Sigil Runner outcasted for the following turn. Could be accomplished with coin Umberwing Twin Slice to take out the Battle Mage, and then next turn, you go double one drop. Twin Slice moves over to the right-hand side.
I like the sound of that, but the other thing that Flurry might be thinking is there a way to get this Frenzied Fellwing down sooner?
Interesting.
But he instead just goes for the one-to-one development, maybe hoping to use the Fellwing along with the Crimson Sigil Runner in one turn to just develop 3 things all at once.
Yeah, it's a big pit you were talking about in Mull It Over, I believe, Gia, which I've seen far too many times now. Of just
You're welcome.
Wanting to yeah, thank you. Get down your threats in big bursts a lot of the time can be very powerful. Timing your threats efficiently, and that's why I think we're seeing, like you said, Flurry trying to go for a big Umberwing Crimson Sigil Runner and the Frenzied Fellwing all on the same turn.
Alutemu gonna go ahead and develop his own Umberwing, and he says, "I'm not taking it." If Flurry takes a VT with his Blazing Battle Mage, then Alutemu has a better weapon target anyway.
This does, of course, mean, though, that Frenzied Fellwing can just become significantly easier to be played on this turn. Still not perfect, because Flurry, I think, really wants to go Umberwing plus, Coin Hero Power, or more likely Twin Slice, to take out the Blazing Battle Mage. So I would imagine Frenzied Fellwing doesn't come down this turn.
I would think so as well. But that play feels very slow. There has to be some way to utilize the coin here a little bit more efficiently. I'm thinking this Battle Fiend has a chance to come down.
This looks great to me. This is already that big swing turn we were talking about. By slowing down a little bit on turn 1, Flurry has allowed himself here to clear off most of the opponent's board, develop a huge amount of tempo, and set up for the Fellwing very efficiently on the following turn. Whereas Alutemu's Frenzied Fellwing is looking fairly stranded for the moment.
Just for now, and we saw Alutemu's first reflex was to go for the Frozen Shadow Weaver onto the face, prevent Flurry from being able to kill off a minion just by using his face, or to do it more conveniently at least. Has that double benefit of also not allowing Flurry to buff his Battle Fiend immediately. But that draw off the top, pretty strong. Makes it a question now for Flurry whether he wants to go Sigil Runner because it's cheaper and get that draw, or the Spectral side, because if you go Sigil Runner, it might get stranded for the Outcast.
Well, I'm thinking actually you could just play it pretty easily from the left-hand side, because if you go Sigil Runner here, attack face for 3, then you can play Fellwing for 1, and then next turn Spectral Sight becomes available.
Bring up a good point.
But that would, of course, float a little bit of mana, given that the hero power is useless on this turn. And therefore, Flurry is deciding to spend the more expensive card now at the expense of a little bit of development. It's a close one.
And the Satyr Overseer is in hand. I would say normally incentivizes Flurry not to attack, but conveniently for him, he can't attack. So he's not trying to expend this weapon charge. Makes it so that even without a second slice, he'll be able to activate the Overseer.
They will never catch me.
Very big draw there in the Twin Slice, just allowing Alutemu to start clearing off that little bit easier. And after the 4-3 goes face, which I think it kind of has to here, Frenzied Fellwing will at least make this development not so poor for Alutemu.
The way the board trades, though, is just super awkward for Alutemu, whether he wants to take a value trade, any of the remaining minions, even after Alutemu uses Twin Slice to deal with one of them, will then trade up into the Shadow Weaver.
Yeah. It is awkward, because taking the VT on the Battle Fiend with the Frozen Shadow Weaver would be so nice, but if he doesn't play the Fellwing now, I just don't think he's playing it for, until he hits Metamorphosis Hero Power to the face, or something really late game like that.
Now for Flurry, the turn is looking very powerful. He can start off with the Sigil Runner. He can play Second Slice and Overseer, trade everything down on the board. His face goes into the 3-2 and ends the turn with 3 minions to Alutemu's none.
I am just loving everything that is going on here, Gia. I think this is really nicely played by Flurry overall. If we look back to these very minute but important decisions over the first few turns, I think by omitting or losing out on a little bit of tempo on turn 1, not going for the coin Umberwing, which I was looking at, he is set up for such powerful draws and such powerful early game plays, and he's put himself in just a devastatingly good position now with the Overseer.
And he's also got this coming up later on if he needs it. Alutemu, unfortunately, if he wants to remove the Overseer, and I think he does, has to take the damage onto the face. But I really love that he's choosing to go with the Hero Power second Twin Slice so that he can also fit the Cane down instead of just using Chaos Strike and hoping to draw something good on her.
Whew. And not only does he play the Cane, he does not trade and points it directly to the face, which with the Metamorphosis and Chaos Strike in hand, I think we can quite clearly see what Alutemu's game plan is in this matchup.
Can indeed. And now for Flurry, he actually doesn't have a way to clear the Cane without using his face. So it looks like he's going to take another 3 damage. And yes, he'll be piling on the pressure starting the race. But will it be enough?
This is a scary situation to be in any matchup where you are both just ignoring each other's minions and going for the face race. It gets even weirder in Demon Hunter, where there are very few actual removal spells. They rely almost entirely on the face attacks, which means that at this point, the first player to get an IB could just be in an unbelievably good situation.
Yes. But for Alutemu, probably can't even afford to worry about IBing here. I think his main priority will be getting down the Metamorphosis. He just has to ask himself, does he get punished by Flurry's own Metamorphosis? Flurry is showing 12 damage already on board, 13 with Hero Power. So something like Glavebound would be lethal. Something like Metamorphosis would be too. And does that force Alutemu to use his removal here or take a trade? Or does that kind of put him in a position where, like, if Flurry has that, you just win. Now I gotta go all face.
These are excellent questions, Gia.
Have you mulled it over, Derek?
I'm in the process of. And it's just so much about calculating the discrete numbers in terms of breakpoints as well, factoring in that, you know, this turn you can go Metamorphosis, Hero Power. Next turn, you'll have 2 Hero Powers after it refreshes. So does that allow you to hit lethal? Do you have to go face here in order to get that? With the way it's shaping out, he will get Alutemu down, or Flurry down to 6 health next turn, plus 4 damage off of the Chaos Strike Hero Power second slice. So he's not setting up lethal with this play.
Yeah, he's not, but I think it ends up being very good for him here. Obviously, because Flurry would have had lethal, as we see, and there's a lot of outs that Flurry could have had for lethal there. So I think the respect from Alutemu is good. And he's also just believing in his own outs. The Chaos Strike only spends 2 mana from his turn, Hero Power 3. So that means he gets the 2 draws in total from next turn, and remaining 4 mana to find the damage he needs.
Yeah, I completely agree, Gia. It gives him a lot of outs. I think Glavebound Adept off the top would be lethal for him here, assuming Flurry doesn't heal. Which is not necessarily a safe assumption to make at all. Skull of Gul'dan could still get the I-Beam here if Flurry wanted to go down that route, because he's so afraid of the lethal coming off the top.
And I do think Flurry would be inclined to do that, because I feel like laying down the Glavebound now doesn't really change his clock so much, but he could be thinking about an I-Beam coming down from the other side.
Yeah, or an Altruist clearing his board.
Exactly.
So if Alutemu goes for the Spectral Sight and draws Glavebound Adept, it is no longer lethal because he doesn't have mana.
Correct. So we're looking at outs from the second Chaos Strike, I think.
Yep, I think second Chaos Strike. If he plays Spectral Sight and hits second Twin Slice, that's also lethal.
It's a very tough call to make because he gets 2 shots at finding outs, but less of those outs are available with the mana left to him.
Exactly.
Versus whether you play the Chaos Strike, you have 1 shot at finding an out, but more mana. The numbers, if you really crunch them, could probably be discreetly decided there. Oh my gosh!
Second Twin Slice, Hero Power again. I think that's just game to Alutemu.
It is! Oh my gosh. And as I was saying, this is not the type of thing you could crunch in hard numbers in the middle of the game itself. This is the kind of thing that you learn from experience and just kind of have an instinct for it.
Wow, that was staggeringly close there. And Alutemu, with going for that line, if he hit the second Chaos Strike, I think he would have been 1 mana off of being able to go for lethal. So it wasn't even necessarily the correct play that he went for. It was just the best estimate that he could come up with in terms of his outs for lethal, and by golly, was he rewarded there.
I don't think he would have been 1 mana short if he also got the Twin Slice that he did get.
Yes,
because he ended up here
farm.
Yes, correct. So there were combinations of cards or just getting the 1 Twin Slice. But again, it would have shut off something like Lavebound Adept by going for the Spectral side. So it's very difficult to say which gave him the best odds. But ultimately, I like that Alutemu, all of our questions were running through his head. In the end, whatever his gut told him to do worked out for him.
Yeah, and this is just Alutemu to a T. He's able to stay cool, calm, collected in these situations that would get a lot of other players flustered, but not our Alutemu. He does go up 1-0 in a match that I didn't think he was going to win, to be perfectly honest. After Flurry was running away with the early game, he expertly spotted with that Kane to face on turn 5 that was the only way he was closing things out. So a well-played game there, playing to his outs from Alutemu, and we will see if he can close things out in the rest of this series after this break. Welcome back, everybody, to Alutemu versus Flurry here at Hearthstone Grandmasters, of course, on YouTube. So make sure you remember to subscribe if you are enjoying Hearthstone Grandmasters, so you know when we are live, which is, of course, every weekend for the next 4 weeks. We are now halfway through Grandmasters for Season 1, Gia. It's flown by.
It really has, and I can't imagine if for us it feels like it's too fast. What about these players that only have, after today, 3 weeks left to decide whether they make it to playoffs, whether they're in the relegation bracket, or whether they're automatically relegated? It is all stakes on the line now.
It really is, of course, one go round on the round robin where everybody plays everyone else in their division once, and then after that we will head to the playoffs with our 8 players who made it through. Obviously the top 6 of Division A and 2 from the top of Division B as well to find out who will be going to the global finals, which means, of course, we need to get through these matches. So Alutemu versus Flurry. Alutemu did take a loss, of course, earlier on in the week against his his fellow countryman Possessi, who we will see in the next match of the day. So if he does want to be in good standing of getting through to the playoffs, he does want to start winning some matches. Top 6 is not especially difficult for him to be able to pull off, but it's got to turn around eventually. And with a win in the first game, it looks like he's in a good spot to do so, Gia.
Definitely, he's got the momentum going for him, but I will say that if there's any deck that's probably near guaranteed to get a win in both these lineups, it's the Demon Hunter. So for Alutemu, that's probably the easiest win he's going to get. I'm really looking at the Rogue and the Druid as the possible points of struggling.
Yeah, I mean, overall, in terms of the stats, Rogue has just been consistently the weakest deck, at least in comparison to its bring rate here across all the regions. And it feels like especially in Asia Pacific, where it had such a high bring rate. Only 2 players, I believe, in Tyler and Possessi that didn't bring it overall. And everyone is being punished for bringing it overall. But before we can get into that, Alutemu does have to take a win on the Druid. And overall, even though this is not a good matchup for him, I've liked his playstyle in the matchup a lot, Gia.
Yes, and we've talked about how the Japanese players tend to go for just the win condition. You go for Fungal Fortunes in the mulligan, you go for Overgrowth. Oh my gosh, these cards exactly. But we did see Alutemu there keeping her removals first time, and I think it's because... Oh, that's unfortunate. I think it's specifically because it was Crystal Power, the one that he plays on the turn that doesn't conflict with Fungal Fortunes, that he kept it. And it lines up so well against a lot of Demon Hunter minions. Flurry's hand is really clunky, my gosh.
It really is. It's always brutal on Alutemu's side, where the animation when you draw off of Fungal Fortunes is slightly different when you're going to discard a minion. And as soon as the cards didn't shift over, I was like, oh, what is it? Is it Ysera? If it was Ysera, he'd be fine, I think. But the Mount Seller is pretty brutal to lose, because if he had that now heading into turn 7 in a couple turns, he could just absolutely dominate this game. Whereas now, Flurry does have a clunky hand, as you said. He may have the time to transition it into a decent one.
It was clunky, but that Overseer off the top was absolutely huge. And you know what? I didn't actually know about the animation thing with Fungal Fortunes, and I wish you never told me, because now I'm going to be dreading it every time I play that card.
Yeah, sorry about it. That's the modern day equivalent of you lost the game. It's just ruining your day for no reason.
Ignorance is bliss. Crimson Sigil Runner
So
off
true.
the top allows Flurry to make the rest of the turn well spent in terms of mana if he also wants to get down his cane. Liking the look of that.
Yeah, the only real alternative was Metamorphosis, which in this stage of the game, I just don't think you want to go for. I really like your point of wanting to develop the minions proactively so it makes their turns with, say, a Glowfly Swarm a little bit more awkward.
Indeed, and Alutemu heading into 10 mana next turn, but almost zero of the threat cards, neither of the Glowflies. The second Mount Seller and the Ysera still in the deck.
These are all the support cards. He needs the big guns ready to come in and put things to rest here. These are, of course, the cards that allow you to survive a little bit longer. The Moonfire and Bog Beam in particular for removal, but even just going for Rising Winds for a minion on the next couple of turns might just be enough to distract Flurry from being able to go for pure damage to face to close out the game.
It's really awkward for Alutemu because I think he wants to be cycling one of the Rising Winds, but because it's a twin spell, both of them, he's got to create hand space, so something like Bog Beam spent. But then the Cane is just a little bit short of being cleared by Bog Beam plus Moonfire. So if he's starting with Rising Winds, he might play it for a minion here. Alright, Moonfire, Rising Winds to cycle. Or not.
I think I like this for a couple of reasons. The minion that he gets down, like I said, it just is awkward for Flurry to deal with. He can't just get rid of it super easily with, say, a backstab or something like that. It might distract a weapon hit or something of that caliber if you're lucky. And the second thing is, he's likely to draw one of his big threats in the next couple of turns anyway. And this also gets him in a position where maybe he can dump enough cards to just play the second overflow.
Demons.
Not entirely sure about it. Yeah.
It's not as far off as you think. If he just goes triple Rising Winds for minions, Power of the Wild next turn, that's a big development. He could throw down an Iron Bark as well, and then he's playing it the turn after.
Sure.
Our enemies will fall.
Just don't know if he'll have the time to do it. And as you said,
That's
it did
fair.
end up being a little bit awkward for Flurry to deal with. He had to commit more damage into it. But honestly, I was looking at Flurry just sending everything to the face. I'm not sure how threatening a single 3-2 is on that board. You're expecting it to grow on the next turn, and that's the threat. If you play Glaive Bound and a single Power of the Wild comes down, then it trades up. So that's the reason for Flurry committing the damage there.
And quite clearly, Flurry is setting up for a somewhat longer-term game plan with, I would imagine, Metamorphosis next turn, Skull the turn after, and just gearing up for one all-powerful Altruist to close out the game.
What to do?
So, I do think that now that Alutemu's gone for the minion development game plan, I'd like to see him commit to what you were talking about. Just a lot of development with these eagles. He could slap on a Soul of the Forest if he wants to, and also Iron Bark one of them. Caveat is that Bog Beam is not able to clear any minion on the board.
Yeah, it really does work out awkward, unless he wants to like commit a hero power as well, but that's then a lot of damage that he's tanking. So I'm fully in agreement with you on this line, Gia. I think this is just a slight optimization over the Power of the Wild line, because if Flurry here wants to commit an Altruist to clear these off, Alutemu can be very, very happy indeed with that, because the Mount Seller or Glowfly Swarms can only be so far off.
Okay, you say this as though... I think you can say this because the Altruist is not really viable for Flurry right now. All of the cards are too expensive to really get a big payoff. But I think if this did end up becoming an Altruist turn, Alutemu doesn't even have the time to get to his next Glowfly or Mount Seller.
Yeah, I guess with the minions on board as well, that's a fair point. I was kind of overestimating how much time he would have with the heal from Overflow and the taunt from the Eagle, but of course, the taunt does not work on the Eagle while Kayn is on the board.
As things stand, though, I'm looking at Flurry possibly just freezing this 4-5, developing Umberwing. It's really awkward with the mana, though, so I can understand the committing of Metamorphosis as early as now. And I love it. Shipping it all face. Got a plan. And he's committing
A very
to
strong
it.
plan. Obviously, even with the taunt available to Druid, there is very limited healing now that one of the crystal powers has been used as well. Ooh.
Oh, is this lethal? What? 16 with the Power of the Wild?
What?
What? It is, I think.
I wasn't even counting!
Me neither.
Neither was Flurry! He didn't dream that he would be dead
it's
here.
one off. Oh, no, the
No,
hero
the
power.
hero power's lethal!
Ah! Oh my god.
Where did that even come from, Gia? Alutemu? I was not
Behind?
even close to considering lethal there.
Me neither. And I love going face. What?
Look at his face as well. He's just acting like that's the most normal play that he has ever made in his life. That was insane, Gia.
It was the correct play. So
Of course it was the
seems to be-
correct play.
I don't know. What I'm trying to make a point of here is that correct is just normal for Alutemu. So that's how he looks. That's his face. Of course he's calm. I do think you said these exact words to me the other week.
I just can't believe it. I'm trying to think of what percentage of GMs would have missed the lethal there, and I think it's actually pretty high. I'm not just trying to dig myself out of there for missing the lethal, but that is not a situation that you often look for lethal with just 3 minions on board, your opponent at 30 health.
Especially,
maybe I'm giving him too much credit here, but I think that was pretty cool.
For sure. I mean, I representative of GMs or anything, but just the fact that he had 10 damage showing on board.
Yeah.
And then he was at 10 mana. He top decked a Ysera. He had Overflow, which looked like he was planning to go for that for the entirety of the game. And then he's like, nope, I found the lethal. Love it.
Yeah. I also love as well that, you know, we were suggesting the play on the previous turn of, oh yeah, you go for Eagles plus the Death Rattles of Soul of the Forest to clear your hand for the overflow. Completely missing the best part of that play was that he just wins the game on the spot on the following turn. That was a real showcase of a fantastic two-turn setup there by Alutemu, and taking a very well-deserved and, again, unexpected win. Druid out of the way, Gia. And we are in that same spot. We end up every single series, it feels like. Rogue is the last deck. Can it get a single win?
I mean, there's the mirror, so at the very least, it's got a 50-50 shot, and then 2 slight to major unfavorables. This is the Highlander Hunter from Flurry, so I think maybe a little bit slower and more capable for Rogue to take a win against than, say, something like Face Hunter. But I would still put the Hunter as the favorite there. So Alutemu still got a hill to climb, but Flurry's got a mountain to climb.
Yeah, as with all these slow decks, the Highlander Hunter, you know, the fact that it is Highlander Hunter, obviously the key card that you're getting out of that is Dino Tamer Bran. And against all these slower decks, be it Mage, be it Rogue, be it Priest, whatever kind of deck that's not running a lot of burst anymore, I just feel like they get so much work done where the Rogue has no counterplay to it at all with their lack of taunts.
I'm so sorry, I'm still hung up on the previous game. Because the point you brought up about what percentage of GMs might have seen that, I wonder if Flurry saw it and still decided that, you know, his best play is to go face. And I still think that he would go for that, even recognizing the potential for lethal, because that would be putting Alutemu on a 3-card combo, which if he doesn't have, Flurry just is in such a strong spot. But I do wonder if it even entered the vicinity of his thought process, because it was nowhere near mine.
This is the interesting thing, Gia, because I feel like there was a lot of misinformation by both us and Flurry, but I think the best play was made either way. Because I agree, you know, even if it was there, it's super unlikely he has it. But if I had to wager a guess, I don't think he was counting that. That is just never a situation that I've seen before where your opponent's at full health, 3 minions on board, which are Eagles as well, by the way, not even especially big minions, and lethal is found.
Still hung up on it, but we do have to move on eventually, and it is going to be a pretty decent starting hand, I think. We saw 1 drops on ends.
Yeah, the thing I'm left somewhat perplexed by here is that Flurry had Zephrys in hand, and mulliganed away Dino Tamer Bran, which is actually something I'm really not a fan of, because I appreciate you want to look for some early game cards against Rogue. They can run away with lackeys earlier on. But being able to go Zephrys, Wild Growth, and then coin Dino Tamer Bran on turn 5 is such a ridiculously powerful combo.
It is, unless your opponent trades their 4-1 and they can't counter 4 and they leave their 2-1 Bone Wraith, and you draw the Bran off the top anyway. Yeah, it is curious to me as well. Maybe it's looking for a stronger mid-game. To be fair, cards like, say, Fairy Dragon and Evasive A-Wing are especially powerful against Rogue that can't target them.
That is true. That is true, and it works out anyway, but I do just prefer, you know, really looking for the power cards, and Dino Tamer Bran for me is absolutely that. Maybe, you know, I'd be interested to hear Flurry's thought process. There's a lot of arguments that can go either way. Rogue mainly has small minions, so Dino Tamer Bran doesn't trade especially well, but I think all of that pales in comparison to the power of a King Crush to the face. But if it was looking good before, it is just looking even better now.
Oh,
Wild Growth.
Wow.
Big ol' whelp. Coin Dino Tamer into Tiamat. This is the dream curve.
It really is, and he doesn't even have to go for the big ol' whelp if he wants to, because he has the Scavenger's Ingenuity, which is guaranteed to draw a 3-cost beast. Of course, the Griffin, probably not the one he wants here, but the chance of drawing Zixor, which is a 5/7 rush after the buff, I think might merit the use of that plus Desert Spear over the whelp. Get to see the Dragon Discover there, unfortunately, but that's a solid one.
Yeah, I don't think it's much better than Twilight Drake here when you've already got a fairly full hand, of course. Actually, probably would have liked a big old whelp of his own, weirdly enough. Given this situation.
Does Alutemu want to taunt up his cat? Thinking about what Flurry could do on turn 5. There's actually a Boom Pistol Bully in this list, which is yet another annoyance for Rogue. And I think the fact that there's
huge.
Right, the threat of Rotnest Drake, I suppose, would incentivize Alutemu Alutemu to commit even more onto the board.
Yeah, it does of course weaken the Twilight Drake for next turn because he has one less card in hand. But like you said about Rottenness Drake, if he goes wider on the board, Drake is more likely to actually stick next turn anyway.
Ooh.
Okay.
No lackeys left in hand.
There's some powerful stuff happening on both sides here. Alutemu is left with a pretty interesting situation. Given that there's a coin in hand for Flurry, and he's heading into turn 6, you can expect, I think it's fair to say, either Siamat or Dino Tamer, or maybe a Varanus here. But all of those plays leave a lackey alive. So I think Alutemu actually has the liberty here to not Shadow Step one of his lackeys in preparation for Togwaggle, and just leave everything on the board and go face.
Also, he could step the taunt lackey and taunt up the cat again, which puts it at the health total, which is slightly above what the big can deal with.
True.
And he gets to kind of have his cake and eat it against specifically Dino Tamer brand. But of course, there are situations where both lackeys get killed. It's really tough.
It's a very difficult situation. If both of these lackeys die, he is so far behind at that point. There is basically no coming back.
Alright. So instead with the preemptive backstab, because he knows that the whelp is probably going to get damaged next turn, trading down the cat.
Yeah. This is a play in no small part, I think, around Desert Spear that would have just been absolutely devastating to clear off both the lackeys here. So it's not like Alutemu was perfectly safe in this situation if he had left the lackeys on board. And he does take the safer line, loses a Shadow Step in the process, but does guarantee himself the Togwaggle. But the bad news is going to come now thick and fast, be it Siamat or Dino Tamer Bram. Flurry is ramping things up very quickly.
And Flurry gonna take the patient approach, actually. Even though he could have cashed in the Bran attack to the face, the Siamat just lines up really nicely against this Twilight Drake.
Yeah. Have to imagine Divine Shield Rush.
Yeah, we could. There was a slight argument for going Wind Fury Rush, say, to clear both minions, because the way the big ol' whelp trades is very awkward into the remaining lackey.
I do definitely see your point. I think I just slightly prefer the getting the 6/6 on board. You just end up with more stats overall.
Mm-hmm. I don't think I need to see the Discover options in this case to decide what Alutemu is going to go for. Of course.
Yeah. With this few options in hand, you've got to draw through to your Galakron, your Kronks, and all that juicy goodness later on in the deck.
It doesn't often feel good to king trade, but this feels like a dang good king trade to me, Derek. 8/8 into 5/7, which still lets you push a 6/6 face. Boom
Pistol, yeah. Boom Pistol found as well now for Flurry, and along with Dino Tamer Bran, Boom Pistol is such a crucial card to know when to play. If you play it at the right moment, the Rogue is just locked out of the game because they have all of their minions are battle cries basically, and they will really struggle to pull things back. But use it at the wrong time when they can just go for, you know, Winged Guardian. Obviously, he doesn't know that. Wand or the Galakron.
Okay, I just make all the ooze. Oh my gosh. Even just the ambush off the top, I was thinking that's really good because he's got this Blackjack Stunner, and he wouldn't have had a really good use for his mana remaining if he started the turn with one. But now everything is coming together.
It's going to be a close game.
I think it's not the ones with Battle Cry. It's the one that goes to 11 mana, but unfortunately, King Crush is only at 3 health, so it's not that cut and dry.
Yeah, he's going to start off by seeing what he can get on the draw, because a 9 mana Siamat in his opponent's hand is really not that scary. If he wants to play that out later on in the game, you're probably okay with that.
Oh my god, he can just flick away the Siamat, he can bounce the Crush, unplayable.
And he's already seen Zephyrus, he doesn't even need to be afraid of a board clear. 7 drop as well, sign me up.
Or 4 drop.
Or a 4 drop, I think that's slightly worse, but whatever.
Oh, it's the Albatross as well. Okay, it doesn't really get that Highlander Disruption payoff anymore because Zephyrus and Bran have been played, but still, I don't see a way back into this for Flurry. That was an insane wand.
We finally get to see the power of Rogue in its full force. Alutemu with the 3-0 sweep here takes his first win of the week. That was an absolute tour de force, Gia. I don't think I've seen a series quite that one-sided before.
It has definitely been a while. I mean, for the longest time, we were thinking that the Demon Hunter was winning there. So in that, against the Druid, sorry. And in that vein, I guess we couldn't call it what it was definitely blindsided instead of one-sided.
Yeah, I mean, that's a great way of putting it. Every single game, we thought that Flurry was decidedly in the lead at every point along the way. The Druid, we thought he was going to beat it with the Demon Hunter. The Rogue, we thought, oh, he's got Zephyrus into Dino Tamer Brand plus the Tiamat. How on earth does Alutemu come back? But he always seems to find a way in what was an excellently played series of Hearthstone.
Definitely. And that is just another feather in Alutemu's cap, because now he's got a 1-1 start. Not too bad at all, but at least keeping toe-to-toe with some of the other Japanese players. We will see how Possessi ends up later, but for Flurry, this is already really tricky for him. 1-1, definitely not the worst place to be, but I feel like for somebody that didn't have the greatest performance in the Swiss weeks and didn't get to see on stream too often, I think he would have wanted to have one of those stellar early performances to really cement him at the top of the Korean players.
Well, he's still got time to turn things around, but as you were saying about Possessi as one of the other Japanese players, we can actually get to see him